All right. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bernie Burnham, and I am the president of your state labor federation, the Minnesota AFL-CIO. Brothers, sisters, and siblings, in a little more than 2 months, nearly every working Minnesotan will have access to paid leave, providing the freedom for parents to bond with their new children and for anyone. I got muted again. Are we good to go? Sorry. All right. In a little more than 2 months, nearly every working Minnesotan will have access to paid leave, providing the freedom for parents to bond with their new children and for any worker to be able to take care of themselves or a loved one during a long-term illness without having to worry about how they're going to pay the bills. Like we are in so many ways for workers, Minnesota will have the gold standard among the 14 states with paid leave programs. The Minnesota AFL-CIO is proud to have co-chaired this broad and diverse coalition of unions, nonprofit, and faith groups that worked for nearly a decade to pass what is going to be life-changing law. I'd be remiss if we didn't recognize the debt of gratitude we owe to the late Senate Majority Leader Carrie Dietzick and House Speaker Melissa Hortman for their work in getting this legislation to Governor Walz's desk. This and so many other pro-worker laws are a fitting tribute they did as work for Minnesotans. So we can all make the most of this briefing. I'd like to quickly recap some of the key areas we discussed during the webinar with Brendan Cummins on paid leave and collective bargaining shortly after the legislation passed. First, like any other labor standard, Minnesota paid leave is designed to be the floor, not the ceiling, when it comes to this benefit. Your unions are still free to bargain paid leave benefits that meet or exceed, but do not conflict with, the requirements of the statute. Second, like other labor laws, the employer has a duty to bargain at the request of the union over how the statute is implemented in the workplace. And finally, I want to remind everyone that this briefing is designed for you to bring the information back to your members. If you have additional questions on how this impacts your employer or the collective bargaining process, we urge you to speak with your union or your union's attorney. Today, you will hear from Greg Norfleet, the director of the Minnesota Paid Leave Division. Greg comes to his current role with nearly a decade of experience in state government with a focus on delivering on high priority initiatives for state leaders. Critically, he led the implementation for the Massachusetts Paid Family and Medical Leave Program, which successfully launched in 2021. Since moving to Minnesota in late 2023, Greg has led the creation of a new division tasked with launching our own paid leave program in January. I will now pass this over to Corinne Horowitz, the public engagement strategist from Deed. Corinne.
Hi, everyone, and thanks again for being here. As Bernie said, I'm Corinne, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. We are so thrilled that so many of you can join us today. We have about 162 folks and counting online with us right now. During today's presentation, we'll provide a quick overview of the paid leave law, who's covered, how payments and premiums will work, and we'll walk through the application process to prepare you to be key messengers about the program to your membership. We'll reserve the remaining time to answer your questions. We also have a lot of information on the website, info.paidleave.mn.gov, including frequently asked questions and a toolkit, which we continually update. I'll also note that following today's webinar, the slides will be posted to the Paid Leave website on our public events page under the About Us tab. Today's webinar will be recorded. Should we decide at a later date to make the recording public, we'll post a link on our website. Additionally, we send out regular email updates about paid leave. You can subscribe to the newsletter on the website as well. By the way, my team member, she is putting all the links I just mentioned in the chat. So we'll start with a 40-minute presentation from Greg, followed by the Q&A session. For the Q&A session, you can submit your questions to us using the chat button. You can find the chat button at the top of your screen. It's the purple speech bubble with the question mark. There are two tabs in the chat, the Featured tab and the My Questions tab. Check the Featured tab to see announcements from our team and links that we mentioned throughout the presentation. Use the My Questions tab to ask a question at any time during the presentation. Only you and the webinar team can see your question. Likewise, All other attendees can only see their questions. And our team behind the scenes will review and moderate the questions for the Q&A session. With such a large audience, we may not get to all of them, but please ask anyways. We keep track of the questions, we'll use them to inform our outreach and update the FAQs on the website. If we don't get to your question, the Paid Leave Contact Center is ready to help you at any time. You can reach out to them through the form on the website, info.paidleave.mn.gov, or by calling 651-556-7777, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 p.m. Okay, that is enough for me. It's time for the presentation. Turning it over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Corinne, and thanks, Bernie, Melissa, and the entire AFL-CIO team for the opportunity to present today. We are so excited to be 70 days away from paid leave being available to Minnesotans across the state, and super grateful for all of the engagement that we've had to date, as well as the support getting this bill into reality. So we're really, over the last 2 years, have been working hard behind the scenes in order to create what Bernie referred to as the gold standard of paid leave programs for the United States. And we really believe that we're going to be able to execute on that. Today, we're going to give you a brief overview of what the program is, just a grounding of what paid leave is, as well as a deeper dive into the employment protections available under the program. And then we're going to give you a preview of the application process, what you should be doing as you prepare to take a leave, and when you're preparing to apply with the paid leave division. So let's just jump in first with what paid leave is. So paid leave was passed in the 2023 legislative session, and what it does is it creates a paid family and medical leave insurance program that will be available to Minnesota workers starting on January 1st of next year. This law provides both partial wage replacement and job protections from for individuals that have a qualifying event. Those partial wage payments are provided by the state to individuals who need time off to care for themselves or for their loved ones. This is an insurance product that is funded, much like private insurance, by premiums, and those premiums are made up of contributions that are split between an employee portion and an employer portion. And again, when an individual has a qualifying event under the paid leave program, instead of the employer paying these partial wage replacements, those benefit payments are coming directly from the state to Minnesotans while they're on leave. Our program is extremely broad in its coverage. It includes nearly all Minnesota workers and all Minnesota employers, including those who may be excluded from other state or federal programs like FMLA, the Unemployment Insurance Program, or Earned Sick and Safe Time. It doesn't matter how much or how little you work in this work for a particular employer. If you're a full-time, a part-time, temporary employee, an intern, if you are a shift worker, you pick up hours sporadically throughout the year, you're still likely covered under the paid leave program. The only exceptions really are for independent contractors, self-employed individuals, and tribal nations who aren't required to participate in the program as a default, but are also able to opt into coverage if they choose to do so. Paid leave is a state-funded and state-administered program, so we're not able to provide coverage to federal workers or any of their instrumentalities, as well as groups like railroad workers or the Red Cross that are covered under, that have benefits covered under federal law. There's also a small exclusion for certain seasonal hospitality workers under the statute, but it is extremely narrow. It only applies to businesses that are seasonal in nature, meaning they earn 2/3 of their revenue during 6 months of the year, are in hospitality, meaning that they either give you a place to eat or a place to eat, and that only applies to those employees that work less than 150 days during the year. Almost everyone else in the state, if you don't fit into those categories, is covered under the paid leave program. One question that we get quite often is what happens if I work in multiple states? So if you are a worker that is splitting time between Minnesota and Wisconsin, are you still covered under the paid leave program? The answer to that really depends on how much time you're spending working in each state. If you work more than half of your time physically in the state of Minnesota, then that work would be covered under the paid leave program. This includes if you're a remote worker, even if you work for a business that's located in Wisconsin, if you're performing remote work in the state of Minnesota more than half of the time, then you are covered under the paid leave program and you could be eligible for benefits. For most folks, it's as easy as figuring out which state do I spend the most amount of my time in. If it's 50% of your time in one state, your work is centered there and you could be covered by paid leave. There are employees that work across multiple states where they spend, say, a third of their year in Wisconsin, a third in Iowa, and a third in Minnesota. In those cases, even though you're not spending 50% of the year in the state of Minnesota, you could still be covered if you live in the state of Minnesota. So this concept can be a little bit hard. So we do have a few scenarios together. And I think the most key thing that I want to get across on this is it really depends on where you're physically working. That is what determines whether or not your work is covered under the program. So in the first scenario, I work in Minnesota, but I live in Wisconsin. Am I covered? Yes, you could be. If you're spending more than 50% of your time in the state of Minnesota, even if you live in Wisconsin, it doesn't matter, you would still be covered because most of your work is happening within our state. If you're an employer that's based in Iowa, but if you have an employer that's based in Iowa, but you're working remotely in the state of Minnesota, are you covered? Yes, you are. It doesn't matter where your employer is located, it matters where you're physically working. And then this last scenario, if you work in multiple states, but you live in Minnesota, you have to think of two tests. First, are you spending more than 50% of your time in any of those states? If so, your work is centered there. If that state is Minnesota, you're covered by the program. If you don't spend 50% or more of your time in a single state, but you live in Minnesota, then you would also be covered by the program. So that's who's covered by the program, but let's talk a little bit about what coverage means. When you hear paid leave, what this really refers to is paid family and medical leave. And there's two lines of coverage available under the program: medical leave and family leave. Medical leave is exactly what it sounds like. It's time off to care for your own serious healthcare condition. A serious healthcare condition is one that's going to keep you out of work for an appreciable amount of time, similar to what you may see under a program like FMLA. It's not necessarily for day-to-day absences, but something that's going to require a longer period of care or recovery. For our program, a qualifying condition needs to last at least 7 days, and it will need to be certified by a healthcare provider that the event is going to last more than 7 days in order to qualify for a leave under our program. But that's medical leave. It's time to care for yourself. Family leave is a little bit broader. It includes time off to welcome a new child into your home, whether that's through birth, foster care, or adoption. Time to care for a family member with their own serious healthcare condition, as well as providing support to survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and to members of our military when they're on an active duty deployment, whether domestically or abroad. The program offers up to 12 weeks of medical leave or 12 weeks of family leave within a benefit year. A benefit year is tied to you as an individual, and it starts on the first day that you go out on leave and goes forward 52 weeks. So in that 52-week span, you can take either 12 weeks of medical leave or 12 weeks of family leave. Now, there are situations where somebody may qualify for both family and medical leave during the same benefit year. The most common example of this is a parent that gives birth. So if you're a birth-giving parent, you may need time to medically recover from pregnancy, whether prenatal or postnatal care. In that case, you would take medical leave to start, but then you could transition into bonding leave to welcome the child into your home. In those cases, an applicant can take up to 20 weeks in total if they're taking leave from both medical and family leave. I will note, because we are going to talk a little bit about the application, but one thing that we're really proud about is that we are going to be the first state in the country to have a combined application for that use case, where a birth-giving parent wants to take both medical leave and family leave. We have that down to a single application when you apply with us. I do want to dive into a little bit of when we talk about serious healthcare conditions, this is something that is certified by a healthcare provider, and it's necessary for both medical leave and caring leave. In both cases, the person who is receiving care that has the serious healthcare condition, their healthcare provider will be required to fill out a certification form. These certification forms have a similar standard to the FMLA, the federal program that offers 12 weeks of unpaid leave today. And really what it comes down to is that there's at least 7 days, and it requires either in-person care or continuing treatment and supervision. These days don't necessarily have to happen all at once in one continuous block, but you're going to need it. It's not something for, I have a cold today, I should take FMLA. It's something for a longer term chronic condition in most cases. We, however, don't define or exclude specific diagnoses as to what qualifies under paid leave. That's a conversation between you and your doctor will be able to provide a professional assessment of how much time you actually need to recover as part of the program. Additionally, one cool thing about our program is the definition of family. Under FMLA, there's a very short list of what qualifies as a family member. And it leaves out some pretty common relationships, including your in-laws or cousins or somebody who maybe was a big part of your family. Our definition of family is very broad, and it includes anyone that you have a personal relationship that creates an expectation and reliance for care without compensation, even if you don't live together. This definition of family allows for a more modern understanding of what families look like in the state of Minnesota, and it allows folks who don't have a traditional family to still be able to access the care that they need to recover. Part of the program, if you qualify for a leave under the program, is partial wage replacements. We, as the state, will make payments to you based off of what you were earning prior to going out on a leave. We provide these payments on a progressive scale, so folks that earn less get a higher percentage of their wages replaced when they're out on a qualified leave. For Minnesotans that are earning less than 50% of the statewide average weekly wage, that number is 90% of your wages can be replaced, and it tiers down from there. But it's up to a maximum benefit that's tied to that statewide average weekly wage, which when we go live, will offer a maximum benefit of $1,423 each week. This progressive scale is really important because it allows low wage workers to be able to afford to take the leaves that they need or to care for the people that they love without having to choose between financial stability and being there for those folks. In order to qualify for partial wage replacements, there's an earnings threshold. You need to have earned at least 5.3% of the statewide average annual wage in the past 4 quarters in order to qualify. That number is about $3,900 when we go live in 2025. That $3,900 can be earned from one employer or from multiple employers that you've had during the past year. This benefit is tied to you, not necessarily your employer. So if you're only working a few hours for an employer and picking up, say, $1,000 from that particular employer, even though you may not make enough to qualify for partial wage replacements from that employer specifically, that money goes towards your financial eligibility calculation if you apply based off of wages from other employers as well. So it is a fairly low threshold to enter, and it is based off of the wages that you've earned, regardless of the number of employers that you've had during the base period. I will also flag that even if you qualify for partial wage replacement from the state, if you're receiving benefits from unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, or Social Security disability insurance at the same time, you won't be eligible for paid leave benefits for those same days. We will be asking folks whether or not they're receiving these benefits as part of the application. We'll also be asking their employers and checking our own administrative data to make sure that folks are not receiving benefits for more than one program at the same time. These benefits, they're paid much like private insurance through premiums. These premiums are split between an employer portion and an employee portion. For most employers, the premium rate is going to be 0.88% of wages. But for small employers, it'll actually be down to 0.66% of wages. And that's on all of your earnings up to the Social Security cap of $176,000. Generally speaking, these premiums can be split between an employer and an employee, with an employer being able to deduct up to 0.44% of wages in order to fund that portion of the premium. These first premiums are going to be paid to the state on April 30th by April 30th of 2026. And that's going to be assessed on all wages paid starting on January 1st through the end of March. And then the premiums will continue to be applied on a rolling basis thereafter. Here's kind of how this looks. We talked about a large employer rate and a small employer rate. For a small employer under our program, what that means is that you have an employer that has 30 or fewer employees, and the average employee makes less than $107,000 a year. In those cases, we'll automatically apply a reduced premium so that they only need to pay 0.66% of wages instead of 0.88% of wages. I will flag that that does not impact the amount that they can take out of employee checks to fund their portion of the premium. So for employers, there is a minimum that they need to fund, where for large employers, they need to pay at least 0.44%. Small employers need to pay at least 0.22%. And the employee's portion is a maximum. An employee can be charged at most 0.44% of their wages up to the Social Security cap to cover the employee portion of the contribution. Now, one thing I want to flag is that the employer's portion is a minimum and the employee's portion is a maximum. So employers may choose, or it can be bargained, that an employer picks up more than their required portion, whether for potentially for competitive purposes, they may choose to pick up more than the required employer minimum. For folks that are thinking about this, the costs and the benefits of using paid leave, we have some tools available on our website, info.paidleave.mn.gov, that can help employees and employers estimate the costs and the benefits of the paid leave program. In just one example, if you're earning $70,000 a year, for just under $6 a week, you'll be eligible for over $1,000 a week in support if you have a qualifying condition like welcoming a new child into your home or caring for a family member with their own serious healthcare condition. So that's what the program is on a high page, but I do want to do a bit of a deep dive into the employment protections associated with paid leave. So generally, the employment protection provisions are administered under the Department of Labor and Industry, but they should feel familiar to a large number of employees and employers on the line because they're very similar to FMLA, but they are more generous than what is available under the federal program. Generally speaking, if you take a leave under this program, you have to be restored to your job or an equivalent position when you return from leave. These job protection provisions, or the job restoration provisions within the law, take effect 90 days following your date of hire, and that's 90 calendar days from your date of hire, not necessarily business days. An equivalent position means that the job is, quote, virtually identical to your previous position and can include things like working conditions, benefits, pay, differentials, bonuses, duties, responsibilities, privileges, authority, and status, as well as work location and schedule. Additionally, employers are required to continue to fund their portion of health and other group insurance at the same rate that they were funding it prior to you going out on leave. I will flag that there is a requirement for employees to continue to pay their portion of these premiums, but your employer cannot stop your health insurance coverage or other group insurance when you are away, nor can they charge you the employer portion of those contributions. Generally speaking, these employment provisions, they're in statute and they cannot be waived by a particular business. That said, there is a section within the statute that allows for construction workers using a bona fide collective bargaining agreement to waive the right to the job restoration provisions and insurance continuation, but only if the workers and employer set forth in a clear and unambiguous terms in the collective bargaining agreement, and that they cite the proper section of state law. So these can't be unilaterally waived, but for workers in the construction industry, they could agree to waive them with their employer. When we think of paid leave in connection to CBAs, think of paid leave as a statewide benefit that applies to all eligible workers, regardless if they're represented by a union or not. It's a baseline of benefits, and that union workers and their employers can choose to negotiate additional benefits beyond this baseline, but they can't take away from what is offered to other employees across the state. It's separate from other employer policies or contract language that may relate to leave, paid time off, or other topics. Questions about how paid leave will fit within existing union contracts should be taken up between union workers and their employers using the appropriate channels. We do get questions about how this impacts seniority or other benefits. And what this comes down to is that paid leave does not erase any seniority or hiring rights protected under union contracts or other workplace policies. Time on leave should be treated like other protected leave. And whether this counts towards accrual of benefits like PTO or seniority within your union really depends upon the worker's contract and a workplace policy. The way that it's stated in the statute is that an employee may, but is not required to continue to accrue additional benefits. The one that is really explicit in the statute is that healthcare continuation, but other benefits like seniority and PTO, those may be offered by your employer, but they're not required to be offered. Your employer is also expressly prohibited from retaliating or interfering with your ability to apply for or use paid leave. Job protections kick in immediately when you take an action under the statute, and that could be as simple as telling your employer that you want to take leave under the paid leave program. These protections apply no matter how long you've been at your job. While your employer is required to restore you to your previous position after 90 calendar days, even if you have not worked for your employer for 90 calendar days, they cannot fire you for attempting to exercise your rights under the statute. They also cannot take paid leave payments from you in order to fulfill any other debt. And it's worth noting that these provisions are enforced by the Department of Labor and Industries Labor Relations Unit. And if you're concerned about your employer not following the law, we'll have the ability to take in complaints, and we'll be working with the Department of Labor and Industry on resolving those complaints as well. A few things that the employer does need to do is they need to make sure that they are notifying their workforce of the program. A couple of requirements here is that the employer, much like under other wage and hour division programs, needs to display a poster in a conspicuous place in English and any other language spoken by 5 or more employees or independent contractors. For those of you that are interested, we have copies of this poster available on our website, but your employer should be posting these notices as well throughout your workplace. Additionally, employers are required to notify each of their employees either 30 days within the date of hire or 30 days before premium collection begins about the program and the premium portion that's going to be taken out of their paycheck. For a program launch, that means that employers need to notify their employees by December 1st of this year. We again have a model notification available on our website to show what sort of information needs to be shared with the employee about the program before the program goes live. One thing to note is that you will be asked to affirmatively acknowledge receipt of this notice. You'll see that in the model template that we have available on our website today. Employers can choose to offer these benefits themselves rather than going through the state plan. However, if they choose to go that direction, they still need to meet all of the requirements of the statute, and their service needs the product that they offer has to be at least as generous as what the state is offering. There's two ways that an employer can do this, either through a private carrier or choosing to self-insure the benefit. So they could pay it through something like salary continuation. Regardless of if the employer chooses to go this route, the payments, the amount of leave available under the program, the folks that are covered, and the eligibility criteria has to be the same or better than what's offered under the state program. You also still have all of the same job protections as other workers. And if there's an issue between you and the private carrier or your employer, you can appeal or raise you can appeal the negative decision or raise concerns about the administration of that equivalent plan to the state. One last thing to notice on equivalent plans is that employees cannot be charged more than what they would have paid under the state plan in order to get coverage under a private plan. That means if your employer buys a private plan and it costs more than what the state plan costs, then they have to absorb those costs. The employee cannot be asked to pay more than 0.44% of their wages in order to access coverage. In addition, one thing that employers are going to be thinking about is how this operates with other types of job protections that are available under other state and federal programs. Our statute explicitly calls out FMLA and the Pregnancy and Parental Leave Act. FMLA is a federal law that provides unpaid leave for the same sorts of conditions, for many of the same conditions that paid leave would cover. And pregnancy and parental leave is a state law that also provides 12 weeks of unpaid leave specifically related to pregnancy or bonding with a new child. It's important to note that employers do have the ability to run these programs at the same time as paid leave if you have an event that qualifies under one or more of the programs. This means that if you have one qualifying condition, say welcoming a child into your home, you cannot use paid leave followed by PPL, followed by FMLA. Your employer can require all three of those programs to run at the same time. So that's what the program looks like at a high level. Let's start talking about what January 1st is going to look like and how you can help folks prepare or help them plan for a leave. What should they be doing to discuss with their employer or with their provider? And what should they let their employer know prior to applying with the division? Like we mentioned, our program looks a lot like FMLA from a certification standpoint. A medical professional is going to be required to fill out a certification form for both medical and caring leave. This form is going to include information about how much leave you need and the schedule of leave that you want to take when you're going to be out of work. Because our program overlaps so heavily with FMLA, if you have an event that qualifies under FMLA and you get paperwork for that program, we will also accept the DOL paperwork as certification for an event under the paid leave program. The other types of leave, military, bonding leave, and most cases of safety leave have other documentation requirements. For bonding leave, for example, we'll ask for a discharge papers, a birth certificate, or just a letter from your doctor letting us know that the child has been welcomed into your home. You will need to submit this certification to the division as part of an application for benefits, but we will not share this certification document directly with your employer. Important to note, though, that your employer does have a right under the statute to request this documentation from you, and you are required to provide it upon written request. When you're talking with your provider about the schedule that you want to take leave, you can take it in one of two ways. You can take leave in one big block of time, which is called continuous leave, or you can take it in smaller blocks of time over a longer time period. That's called intermittent leave. Under the program, and you can take continuous or intermittent leave for any leave type, including bonding leave. I will say, though, that the employer does have the ability to determine how big of a block that time is for intermittent leave. So you could need to take leave in 1 day, half day, 1 hour, down to 15-minute increments of time, depending on the policy of your employer. But in any case, regardless of the type of leave that you're requesting, you would be able to take it either with a continuous schedule or an intermittent schedule. You are required as part of an application for benefits to notify your employer using their customary and usual procedures for requesting an absence from work. You should notify them at least 30 days before your leave begins, or as soon as possible if your reason for leave if there isn't anything preventing you from doing so. There will be situations where somebody learns of a diagnosis in the room with their healthcare provider and needs to go on leave immediately. In that case, you should still tell your employer first before applying to the division, but that 30-day threshold does not apply. As I mentioned, you should follow your employer's documented workforce policy for how you notify them about the request for leave. Your employer can require you to call a certain number, to meet with a certain person, to send an email to a particular inbox to notify them that you're going to be requesting a leave. And we will ask this as part of the application for benefits, and we will share that information with the employer as well. Another thing to consider when you're having a conversation with your employer prior to applying for leave is whether or not you are going to receive additional paid benefits during the course of that absence. Employees may have access to other employer-sponsored benefits during the course of a leave. And these benefits can support workers in one of two ways. If your employer chooses to offer what are called supplemental benefits, they can top off the amount of benefit, the payment that you're receiving from partial to full wage replacement. Remember, paid leave pays a percentage of your wages. It doesn't pay 100% of your wages while you're away. Your employer could choose to offer supplemental benefits to make up the difference between partial and full wage replacement. However, that is a policy of the employer to decide whether or not to offer supplemental benefits. If they don't offer supplemental benefits, as a worker, you still have the ability to use your own time off, whether paid time off, vacation, or sick time. However, that would be used instead of receiving a benefit from the state. So you could still take a PTO, vacation, or sick day, but for those days, you would not get a benefit from the state for the same time period. It's good to have a conversation with your employer to set expectations of what the other types of pay you will be receiving during the leave. It's good to set those expectations prior to coming and applying with the division. So let's talk about, you've had the conversation with your provider, you've had a conversation with your employer, and now it's time to apply for leave. What does that look like? Well, here's the application process on a page. It should always start with the employee and the employer having a conversation about the need for leave and working through a schedule together of or at least informing the employer of the need for leave and the schedule that you're going to need to take leave on. The employee then can submit an application with the division at paidleave.mn.gov. They can either do this online or over the phone. For folks with limited English ability, we also have access to a contact center that has language line capabilities for over 150 languages. After the application is submitted, the employer is notified that an application has been submitted and asked to verify some information that was submitted as part of the application. We then, after the employer has 7 days to respond to that request for information, but they can respond to it on day one. If they respond to it on day one, we'll start adjudicating it immediately. After the employer response is returned, the paid leave division will use information from the employee, the employer, the healthcare provider, and our own administrative data to make an adjudication decision, meaning we're going to decide whether to approve or deny the application. After the application is adjudicated, both the employee and the employer will be notified of that determination. You're going to need to have some information ready for when you apply with the division. So when you navigate to your website, we're going to ask you some information, basic personal information like your name, your address, your phone number. We'll also ask for potentially your driver's license number or social security number or ITIN, the dates for which you're planning to take leave, and the certification documents that we talked about earlier. So the proof that you have a serious healthcare condition or that you welcomed a child into your home, or other certification required documentation showing the need for leave, as well as information on your employers, including whether or not you're going to be receiving additional pay during the course of the leave, and the schedule for which you're planning on taking leave. When we launch in 2026, you'll be able to apply up to 60 days before leave starts in most situations. Our application is set up so that you can start and save an application in progress. So you don't have to do it all in one go. But as we've been testing our application, it takes around 5 minutes to complete an application for benefits all the way through. But if you don't have a certain piece of information and you need to come back, we'll save your progress in the application that you've submitted so far. We're also, I mentioned earlier, we're going to be the first state in the country with a combined birth and bonding leave application. But for parents, non-birth giving parents, or parents that welcomed a child into their home in 2025, for non-birth giving parents or parents that are only going to take bonding leave, we're going to be the third state in the country that will allow you to apply for bonding leave prior to the child actually being born. We'll do that by asking information about the estimated due date of the child, and will allow you to save your application and then be able to come back and we'll be able to adjudicate what we have available. And then you can come back when the child is welcomed into your home with the certification documents so that we can then start paying you while you're bonding with your new child. We're going to do our best to make the right decision every single time, but in cases where there is a disagreement about a particular decision, an approval, a denial, the amount of payment that an individual is receiving, you may appeal those. There is an appeals process within our division, and you'll be able to appeal any decision made by the division as part of an application for benefits. These appeals have to be filed 30 days from the date of determination, and this deadline and more information about how to appeal will be included on every determination notice that you receive as part of an application for benefits. With that, there's a ton of ways to stay engaged and to get prepared for January 1st. And the first stop should really be our paid leave website. That's info.paidleave.mn.gov, where we have a number of steps set up for how you can get ready to take leave. Frequently asked questions about the programs, our calculators, the ability to sign up for our newsletter, and a place to ask us questions. You can send us questions through email, or we have a contact center of folks that are ready to go. That number is 651-556-7777, and we're open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily, except for state holidays. With that, Corinne, I'm going to turn back to you for a few questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Greg, and we're going to transition over to our Q&A session. But remember, if we don't get to your question, please know that the contact center is ready to help you with on the online form, or like Greg said, by calling 651-556-7777. Okay, we're going to start answering some of the questions that were submitted to you all in advance, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. So the first question is one we hear a lot. It's about bonding leave. And the question is, if I already went on parental leave in 2025, can I also take paid leave for bonding in 2026?
Okay. Yeah, this is a great question. We get it a lot. So here's the way that it works. So our program goes live on January 1st, 2026. Leaves taken before that date cannot be used to reduce the amount of leave that's available to a particular person after the program goes live. Bonding leave can be taken within 12 months of welcoming a child into your home. So if you welcomed a child into your home in 2025, you would be able to take bonding leave under the paid leave program up to the 1-year anniversary of welcoming that child into your home.
And you mentioned this a little bit in the presentation, but can we apply for parental leave 60 days before paid leave goes into effect? Or do we need to wait till January 1 to apply for 2025 babies?
So keep an eye on our website and our newsletter for information about when the portal will be available. We do anticipate being able to take in applications in advance of January 1st, but please pay attention to the website and our newsletter in order to get the timing right on that.
Great. A couple more on bonding leave. Can I be approved for leave before telling my employer that I'm taking paid leave?
I'm sorry, say again.
Can I be approved for a leave prior to telling my employer that I need to take paid leave?
No, you can't. So part of the law requires an employee to notify their employer in advance of applying for the paid leave program, and that's in all situations. If you're able to provide 30 days notice to your employer, if it's a foreseeable need for leave, you should give that notice to your employer prior to applying to the division. Even in cases where it's not possible, where you don't have 30 days to notify your employer, the standard is as soon as practicable. And in the statute, that still assumes that you'd be able to tell your employer prior to applying with the division. So we won't be able to approve any application for which an employer has not been notified.
Okay, does medical leave count for pregnancy-related health issues or C-section recovery? And if so, would someone be able to take 20 weeks for both birth and bonding time?
Yeah, so that's what we talked about as part of the presentation. You can take up to, if you are a birth-giving parent, you could take both medical leave and family leave, medical leave to recover from pregnancy and family leave to welcome the child into your home. And in that case, you would be limited to 20 weeks of total leave.
Great. And the last one on bonding is, can you take bonding leave intermittently?
Yes, you can. Under our program, you can take any type of leave, either continuously or intermittently. That includes bonding leave.
Okay, moving on a little bit, who decides what qualifies a person for mental health related medical leave?
I'm sorry, Corinne, you froze up on me. It might be my side.
Who decides what qualifies a person for medical related mental health leave? Greg, can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. Did you hear what so the question is, who decides, who certifies someone for mental health related issues?
Okay, who certifies someone for mental health related issues? It would have to be a healthcare provider that's working in their designated field of practice. So a mental health provider could be a psychiatrist. It could be a individual who's capable of diagnosing the need for leave within their scope of practice.
And another kind of leave that we had a question about was safety leave. How will safety leave certification work? And for both, how much information will be shared with the employer?
Okay. Like we mentioned, we will not share any certification documents directly with the employer as part of the application process. However, the employer does have a separate right of action under the statute to require the employee to provide that certification documentation. As part of an application for benefits, if you're applying for safety leave, the only thing that the employer will see through the portal is that you're requesting family leave, because safety leave fits under that category of leave, as well as the dates that you are requesting leave, along with information around whether you said you're taking any other payments during the course of the leave as well. In terms of how do we certify it, we've been working with the advocate community within the DVSA community to develop a trauma-informed application process that allows for designated certifiers that are, again, working in their scope of practice to be able to tell us that an individual is a survivor of domestic violence or sexual assault and that they will require leave. We don't get information about the specific qualifying event. We don't have information about the abuse that took place, but we do have a certifying party telling us that the person is a survivor and will require leave. And then we will require the individual to attest to the utilization of leave in line with the statute.
Great, thanks, Greg. Switching gears a little bit to FMLA, we have a few questions. The first is, if someone already started FMLA in December 2025, can they switch to paid leave starting on January 1st?
Yeah, great question. So like we said, our program goes live on January 1st, 2026, and leaves taken before that date can't reduce the amount of leave available to a person. If you're on a qualifying FMLA leave that would qualify under paid leave, say you start your FMLA leave in December and then January 1st comes along, you would be able to apply for paid leave beginning on January 1st, as long as the medical certification shows that you require leave beyond that date.
Okay, and if I'm taking paid leave and FMLA, do I have to fill out both forms?
So great news. So we've been talking with healthcare providers throughout the process of building the program. And some of the feedback that we received was on the use of FMLA forms. So the Department of Labor has their own model notifications. Employers also have their own FMLA forms that they sometimes require. We, as a division, made a choice that we will accept FMLA forms as long as they are for a condition that would qualify under the paid leave program and that the form shows the need for leave.
Can employees take FMLA and then apply for paid leave to extend their leave?
So no, in most cases. So this 2025 thing that we talked about at the beginning, where a person may be eligible to take FMLA in 2025 and then also paid leave in 2026, that's really a one-time thing. Employers do have the ability to require employees to use FMLA at the same time as paid leave.
And how will paid leave impact existing short-term disability policies?
Was the question how paid leave will interact with short-term disability
Yes.
and long-term disability? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as part of our statute, paid leave is the first payer in disability payment arrangements. So if you have an existing short-term disability program, that means that we will not offset our benefit based off of you receiving disability payments from a third-party source. If that's the case, it's worth noting that the third-party provider, or the disability provider, is able to reduce the payment that they make to you as a result of receiving paid leave benefits. Typically, what will happen is that coverage will shift into what's called in excess coverage to make up the difference between partial and full wage replacement. But it's probably worth looking at to make sure that just knowing that the disability provider can reduce the benefit that they pay you, but we won't reduce ours.
Great. Can an employer make different decisions about paid leave between union and non-union employees?
Potentially. It would have to be part of a determined policy, but there is discretion in the statute so that different employees can be treated somewhat differently. This goes from things such as the amount that the employer pays in the premium. That's something that they could choose to pay more than the required portion for some or all of their staff. But they would want to either have that collectively bargained or part of a documented policy if they're going to be treating different classes of employees differently.
Can an employer offer private insurance for one type of leave, like medical, and use a state paid leave program for family leave?
Yes, they could. We will allow equivalent plans for either family or medical leave, as well as both family and medical leave. By far, the most common scenario is that if somebody is opting to provide these benefits themselves, they're going to opt to provide both family and medical leave, but there is the flexibility under the law to allow them to just apply to one.
Okay, I have a couple more pre-submitted questions and then we'll get to the ones that were submitted today. One is about fraud. How will fraud in the paid leave program be prevented?
So we have a shared commitment towards ensuring that the limited funds that we have available go towards the designated purpose. Every time that we stop a fraudulent payment, that means that there's more money available for somebody to be there with their kid or to be there with a family member that needs them. We're going to be doing this in a variety of ways, some invisible, some visible. One that I can point out over the line is we've created a process of multiple points of verification that includes employers. So every time that an application is submitted, some information is shared with an employer. Part of that is in order to reduce the number of fraudulent applications that we receive or to catch fraudulent applications before payment is made.
Great. And the last question is about funding. What will happen if there are insufficient funds in the paid leave reserves to meet demand?
So our funding, we were allocated over $650 million to support the implementation and operation of the paid leave division in the 2023 legislative session. With that, we have completed an actuarial analysis based off of experiences in other state-run paid leave programs, as well as the private sector for private insurers that have similar products, to estimate what the cost of this program is going to look like, not just now, but multiple years from now. So we feel very confident in the funding that we have available in order to fund the benefits, but it is something that is revisited each year. So each year we'll do an actuarial analysis based off of actual use of the program in order to set the rate for the program in future years. There is a legislative cap where the total premium cannot exceed 1.1% of wages, but we don't anticipate getting close to that number.
Great. I will move on to the questions that were submitted today. We have plenty of time left, so if you do still have a question, please submit it in the chat button. So the first one is that we are a local union and have an executive board staff who receive a small monthly salary and members who are occasionally paid lost time that count as wages. However, it amounts to less than $1,000 annually. Would we include them as employees for paid leave? These individuals also have a separate full-time job with their employer.
So if they're receiving wages as part of their work, they're likely covered under the paid leave program. And those wages should be reported as part of wage reporting, as well as premium should be collected against those wages. Like I mentioned, our financial eligibility is based off of wages from multiple employers. So even if you only earned less than $1,000 in this position, all the wages that you earned from your other positions also count towards financial eligibility. Additionally, those wages can count towards the benefit amount calculation as well. So they would go towards calculating the benefit that we pay to that individual when they go out on leave.
Great. Does coverage for use of paid leave to care for family members, like siblings, cover family members residing outside of Minnesota?
It does. So you're able to take take caring leave for any family member, regardless of if you live with them or not, whether or not they're in the state of Minnesota as well. We will, however, require that the healthcare provider of the individual that needs care certify that the individual has a serious healthcare condition and requires care from that specific person. So there is a point that the healthcare provider is going to need to certify that that person is needed in order to support the caring leave.
Does a medical condition need to last 7 consecutive days, or can it be intermittent and cumulative?
Yeah, it could be intermittent and cumulative. So the qualification is that the underlying qualifying event lasts at least 7 days. If it's a chronic event that's going to be like a lifelong affliction, that could qualify under it. What they're really trying to avoid with the 7-day qualifying event is short-term illnesses that aren't going to keep you out of work for an appreciable amount of time. Something like having a cold or something that would be better fit under earned sick and safe time would not necessarily be covered under this program unless it's something that's going to require inpatient care or continuing treatment and supervision in order to qualify under paid leave.
Great. You covered this a little bit when talking about FMLA, but just to bring it up again, is it required that an employee take this leave concurrently with other leaves like FMLA?
It is the way that the statute is written is it's the employer's discretion to decide whether or not to run the programs concurrently, which means that the employer gets to choose whether or not FMLA and paid leave run concurrently.
Would it be possible to combine Minnesota paid leave with short and long-term disability programs to make up the difference between what the state pays and your regular wages?
Yeah, totally. If you have a short-term disability plan, like we said, we won't offset our payment for anything paid through a disability plan. I'll also take this opportunity to note that an employer could choose to offer what are called supplemental benefits. If they choose to do that, almost any payment that an employer makes to an employee while they're taking a qualified leave can do just that, make up the difference between partial and full wage replacement. And that could be your paid time off, sick time, vacation time. Again, that is part of the employer's discretion on how this works within a business. It's something that can be bargained as well, but it is an option to also get to full wage replacement. And also note that even if your employer doesn't offer supplemental benefits, so they're saying they won't just allow you to use your paid time off, sick time or vacation time to get to full wage replacement, you could still choose to use that time during the course of your leave. But we, as a result, in the paid leave division would reduce the benefit that we pay to you. So you would get a payment from your employer from those days instead of from the paid leave division.
So you talk about supplemental benefits. What about offsets? Can the employer replace short-term disability or earned sick and safe time with Minnesota paid leave?
So yeah, that's still kind of getting around the same concept, right? Like for short-term disability, it's kind of weird because like they are, well, by statute, we're the first payer, so we won't reduce our payment from that we make to you if you're receiving short-term disability. But if you're for programs like ESST, there's different, sometimes the qualifications will overlap, sometimes they won't. If you're using ESST or PTO or sick or vacation time, again, it's kind of the policy of the employer on whether or not that's going to be in a top-off payment or a substitute payment. It could work either way, where if based off of the agreement that you have with your employer, that it could be used as a portion of a day to make up just the difference between the benefit and your normal pay, or it could be used instead of receiving a benefit from the state.
Okay, another related question, the last one on this. If we have both short-term disability and paid leave, can we basically get paid twice?
So I'll flag again, we won't offset our benefit payment if you're receiving disability payments. However, the short-term disability provider by statute has the right to reduce the benefit that they pay you. And you are limited to receiving your normal pay during the time that you are out on a qualified leave. So a likely situation would be that you would get the benefit from us, and then you would get a partial benefit from your short-term disability provider that's offset based off of receiving benefits from our program.
Great. Okay, if you deduct a portion of insurance for employees or their dependents, how do you collect funds while they're out on leave?
Okay, so this is getting to the insurance continuation requirement. So to remind folks, employers are required to continue to fund health and other group insurance products at the same rate that they were funding it prior to the employee going out on leave. That opens up a natural question of, well, how does the employer collect the employee's portion of it? And again, this kind of comes down to the agreement between you and your employer, because there are ways to do this. We've seen situations where the employer has required an employee to write a check for their portion of the premium before they go out on leave. We've seen employers wait until an employee comes back from leave to recoup the employee's portion of the contribution. We've seen employers that offer supplemental benefits like top-offs or others, and then use that as a base to take premiums out of to fund the healthcare premium. And we've also seen employers enter into agreements with employees with their consent to be able to reduce or to over-withhold on or to pre-fund their insurance premiums prior to the employee going out on leave so that they can maintain the tax advantage status of those deductions.
This next question is for employers who offer private plans. If your employer offers an equivalent plan, would you then not be qualified for the state plan?
So you would be qualified for all of the rights that you have under the state plan. It would just be being administered by a different party. All of the same rights and responsibilities, job protections still would apply. You just wouldn't apply to the state when you're requesting a leave. So regardless of if your employer is offering these benefits through a private insurance company or through them by themselves, they're still obligated to meet all of the requirements of the statute and be at least as generous as what's offered under the state plan.
Great. The next question is going back to bonding leave. When someone becomes a foster parent, placements can often happen with very little notice. Would a 30-day notice be required in that case? For example, if someone learns they're welcoming a child into their home with only 2 or 3 days of notice?
That's a really interesting question. And it really would, the notification requirement, it's 30 days or as soon as practicable. And if it's something that's outside of the control of the applicant or the employee, like that they just learned about the placement a week before it happened, that's a totally acceptable reason to not meet the 30-day requirement for notifying your employer. However, even in that situation, you should still notify your employer first before applying to the state. There's still a requirement to notify them as soon as you can.
Okay, and then we kind of have a question about the flip side. What happens if your leave needs to start early? For example, if you give birth prior to your expected due date.
Yeah, so this is kind of a cool thing about the way that we've built bonding leave and birth and bonding leave is that you can apply in advance of a child being born. What we'll ask for is the estimated due date of the child, but kids don't always show up when you expect them to. So we know that that could happen before or after that expected due date. Simply, if you've already submitted the rest of your application, if the child comes early, that just means log into your account when you're able, provide the discharge papers or a letter from your doctor saying that the child's been welcomed into your home, and we can change the dates of your application just like that.
Okay, I have another similar question. Can you change the dates you plan to take the leave? For example, if you initially want to take the leave continuously all at once and then decide to switch it to a few days a week or intermittent leave, is that possible?
Totally possible. And we do have the ability to edit leaves after they've been submitted to modify the schedule that you'd be using. But for launch, that is going to be limited to changing the start date of your leave or extending your leave or ending your leave early. If you need to change the schedule of your leave from going from a continuous schedule to an intermittent schedule, that would require a new application. But it is something that we're working on for future releases to allow you to make that modification within the portal.
Now, this question is a little bit more for employers. Do employers need to set up an account through the Minnesota Unemployment Insurance System? Is it the same login or is it a new account?
Oh, cool. Yeah, so on the employer side, we've been talking about 3 major steps that they need to do to get ready for paid leave. The first step of this is to set up your accounts with the division in order to make sure that you're ready to participate. There's 2 accounts under the paid leave program. The first is the employer account, which is in the existing UI system. For employers that already participate in UI and all of their employees participate in UI, they didn't actually have to create a new account, because what we did was we took their existing unemployment insurance account and we converted it into a joint paid leave UI account. So when employers are completing their regular wage detail reporting, that information is shared directly with the paid leave division to meet that requirement. It's also where an employer is going to submit premiums as part of funding the program starting next year. Within that same portal, there's the ability to designate a leave administrator, and that's the person who's going to have access to the HR side of paid leave. So we've developed a portal for HR professionals that is, with input from folks from across the state, to provide them with some transparency and actionable information that they need in order to administer leave on their side. So they need to designate a leave administrator in the UI portal and then set up an account at paidleave.mn.gov. And then they'll have access to that leave administrator portal.
Great, thanks, Greg. We have a couple questions here left. So if you didn't hear your question or if you have an additional question, please put it in the chat. We'll make sure we get to it. So Greg, to clarify, does Minnesota paid leave replace earned sick and safe time?
No, these are different programs and they do have slightly different uses. So earned sick and safe time chiefly is meant for day-to-day episodic sick days and that sort of thing. We're closer to FMLA or short-term disability as something that's going to keep you out of work for an appreciable amount of time. These programs can work together, like we talked about with supplemental benefits or substitute payments, but they are distinct from one another. ESST is managed by the Department of Labor and Industry, while we over at DEED administer the paid leave program.
The next question is, what does the payment turnaround look like after the application has been approved?
Great. So let's talk timeliness. So out of the gate, we're anticipating being able to make an approval decision within 14 days of an application being submitted. In terms of when a payment is issued, it really depends on when that application came in. If you applied prior to going out on leave and you got an approval in hand and you start leave after that approval is in hand, we'll issue a payment on day 8, or we'll start processing the payment on day 8 of your leave. If you are instead, you have an event that requires you to apply for leave unexpectedly, so you're immediately out, so you're already on leave by the time that an approval is given. If 8 days have passed, we'll start processing that payment the next day after the approval is granted. But the timing is different depending on when the approval happens.
Great. Will the state check, this is getting back to the fraud question, will the state check the authenticity of doctor notices and forms from the certification?
Yeah, that's a big part of what we're going to be doing. So we've got existing relationships with a lot of large healthcare providers, large and small healthcare providers across the state. And a big part of what we're going to be doing as a division is ensuring that the documentation that is submitted is valid in order to ensure that the payments go towards their intended use.
This is a question about the locality test of who is covered by paid leave. How is the 50% of time physically working in the state of Minnesota calculated? Is it based on the hours worked? And does it include hour time or just base hours? Is it the 44% of straight time, or does it also include overtime and premium pay?
Great question. So it's based off of the hours worked, and it doesn't make a distinction between like the type of hours that you're working. It's just that you're spending 50% of the time that you're working physically in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, great. If an employer wants to pay the full 0.88%, does any wage need to be inputted for the employee, or how does that work?
Any wage need to be imputed for the employee. I think this is getting towards tax status here. So some of the way that taxes work on this, does it need to be imputed? It does need to appear on box 13 of a W-2 as 0.44%, but I don't believe that I would have to check on that, Corinne, because like the specific tax guidance is pretty narrow here, so I'll have to follow up on that.
Yes, and we do have more tax guidance. She can put that in the chat. We have a 1-pager on how, actually it's more like a 3-pager on how taxes work. And so we'll add that to the chat. The next question is, if you are on bonding leave, are you able to work or use sick time to supplement your pay so that you will be receiving full pay? So could you work another job, for example, or use sick time to receive full pay while you're on bonding leave?
So the answer to that is different depending on what you're doing. If you're using sick time, it goes into that supplemental benefits versus substitute payments conversation where you could use sick time instead of receiving a benefit from the division, or if your employer allows, you could use it to top off your benefit that you're receiving from the state. But if you're working additional hours above and beyond what you were normally working in during the course of a leave, those hours and those payments are offsets against the benefit that we will pay.
So now that we've answered one tax question, I think we'll probably have a lot more, and we'll make sure to put the 1-pager in the chat. But Greg, can you answer one quick question on taxes? For paid leave contributions that we receive, are taxes withheld, or do we have to pay that separately at the end of the year?
Yeah, so you're able to withhold taxes as part of the application process. But the way that federal taxes work on this program is that for family leave, it's not considered wages. So it's only, you'll receive a 1099 at the end of the year based off of what we pay to you. But on the medical side, the portion of the benefit that's attributable to the employer, which is either half or a third of the benefit payment that we make, is considered wages and is subject to Medicaid and Social Security taxes. To help employees out, we will automatically withhold that amount from benefit payments that we make and make that contribution on your behalf to the IRS. So you won't have to make that portion of the tax payment at the end of the year.
Great. And again, we'll put the tax information in the chat. The next question is, can you receive paid leave for intermittent flare-ups approved by FMLA?
Yeah, like we said, paid leave can be taken for either continuous or intermittent leave schedules. If you have an event that requires intermittent leave because you have flare-ups, that's a chronic condition that could qualify under paid leave.
Okay, we have union members who don't work during winter months and apply for unemployment insurance during that time. Do we need to pay paid leave for those employees during that time, and how is that calculated?
No, so you would only pay the premium based off of wages paid. So you only pay the premium on wages that you actually pay in individual. If they're off payroll, you're not making premium payments on their behalf.
Greg, you mentioned that when you're off on paid leave, the employer must continue to pay for health insurance. Are they also required to continue to contribute to your pension and 401k?
No, they are not. Like we said, the only explicit continuation component of the statute is health and group insurance that the employer needs to continue to fund. Additional benefits, including retirement, 401k, or others, the employer may, but is not required to offer those.
So Greg, you talked about how employers can provide supplemental benefits to top off the payments. From the state, will the employer be allowed to require employees to use PTO during paid leave?
No, they won't. So unlike under FMLA, where an employer can require you to exhaust your existing paid times or sick time before as part of taking a leave under that program, employers are expressly prohibited from doing so under the paid leave program. So they can't require you to use your paid time off.
Greg, how would an employee figure out what percentage of the pay they'll get through the paid leave program?
I think the best resource is to check out our calculator online. So if you go to info.paidleave.mn.gov, we do have a calculator both for the premium side to see what the cost of the program is, as well as the benefit side, so that you can see what you would be able to receive during a qualified absence.
So Greg, on private plans, if the employer goes with a private insurance, what if the paid leave gets denied from them and they appeal, but they're still denied? And they believe that the state would have approved the claim or request. Can they appeal further to the state?
Yeah, that's the process. If you've gone through the first round of appeals with the private carrier, you would have a right of appeal through the state.
Great. Are you automatically enrolled in the Minnesota paid leave program, or can you opt out and go with your employer's short-term disability plan if it is an equivalent plan?
So there's no individual employee opt-out available under the program. If you are providing covered employment under the state program, you are required to participate in it. You're not able to opt out as an individual. For an employer that has an equivalent plan, they would inform you that that's where the coverage is coming from. But they would also, again, need to be approved as an equivalent plan by the division in order to offer that.
Okay, this is a great question about folks who have multiple jobs. If a worker has multiple employers and possibly covered under the state plan and on a private plan with another employer, will that worker need to apply to both programs?
Yeah, they would. In that situation, they would need to apply to both based off of the employer from whom they are taking leave. You'll need to apply for leave based off of that. Now, if both employers are covered by the state plan, you'll be able to apply for both employers at the same time through the paid leave provision.
Okay, this is a question about intermittent leave. What's the largest increment of intermittent time an employer can set in a policy? And is that independent of how leave is accrued to be used for other reasons?
So the maximum increment is 1 day. An employer can set an increment of leave up to 1 day. Now, it has to be in line with how they are offering other types of leave, but that's really a restriction on, like, they can't force you to use it in smaller increments. But if they were to require you to use full days, they'd be able to do that under the statute.
Okay, the last question here is, can my employer require that my bonding leave be taken consecutively? Or can a new parent take 2 weeks a month for 5 months, or 1 week a month for 10 months, or even a day or two a week until the time is used up?
So the requirement here is that the employee make a reasonable effort to not unduly impact the operations of the employer. But the employer does not have the ability to deny an intermittent leave request for bonding leave, but there is a requirement that the employee do make a reasonable effort to not unduly impact their operations.
Great, thanks, Greg. Okay, it's almost 2 p.m. here, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'll start wrapping up by asking for your feedback on today's webinar. We'll put a QR code to a short survey, and we'll put a link in the chat as well under the feature tab. The feedback survey only takes 1 or 2 minutes and it'll really help us understand what worked well and what can be improved. As I mentioned, if we didn't get to your question today, please see our website where you can see the FAQ pages for both employers and employees. There's a lot of great information there. And as always, our contact center is here to help you with all of your questions. You can just fill out the form on the website or call 651-556-7777. And as a final reminder, the slides from today's webinar will be posted to the website as soon as they've gone through an accessibility review. So thank you all for joining us and have a great afternoon. Bye.
Great job, everybody.